Hello, I'm Julie Burt, and I'm here to talk to you about Never Fade Away by William Hart. The novel follows the story of two main characters, Professor John Goddard and student Tina Lee. Professor Goddard is a professor in the English department at CSUM, and he is teaching Tina for an English 002 course, which is actually below English 101. He has a degree in ESL, and he has a heart for teaching students that are English language learners. Tina is actually from Vietnam, so English is not her native language. The story is set in the 80s, so Tina Lee and John Goddard were in Vietnam for the Vietnam War conflict. Goddard was a soldier in Vietnam, so he suffers from some mental and emotional post-war problems from his time in Vietnam. Tina was from Vietnam. She and her family tried to escape during the war, but her family was killed when the boat they were trying to escape on, it was a shrimp boat, was overtaken by pirates. Her dad was killed immediately, and she and her mom were captured and taken to an island. Her mother was killed on the island. Tina was trapped in a cave and abused until she was rescued. And then she came to live in the United States and ended up going to CSUM. One of the quotes from the story that I thought was especially meaningful is found on page 24. And there, John Goddard discusses the squeaking wheel. He says that the squeaking wheel gets the grease. I completely agree with this statement and have noted this in many classrooms. Oftentimes in my own classroom, I spend time dealing with discipline problems instead of teaching as I need to. He relates this back to more fluent students knowing what to say and how loudly to pitch their fits so that they can get the attention they need, while some of the ELL students or students from lower socioeconomic statuses may not know how to get the attention they need and may not even have that type of confidence or attitude to grab hold of the system and stand up for their student rights. There is actually not a great population of ELL students at my school, so I have very little experience teaching students in this English language learner population. My classroom did contain students from low-income families. These students were similar to Tina Lee because they lacked some of the experiences in American culture as she did. Also, Tina Lee's daily struggles encompassed much more than passing English comp. She worried about her rooming situation with Renice, loneliness, the stress of possible expulsion, and her own painful memories of Vietnam. Some of my students struggled with home issues such as parental disputes or absences, overpopulation within their homes, and lack of attention. Like Tina Lee, some of my students living in poverty needed a helping hand from a teacher to restore their own self-efficacy. On a side note, the policy at this school was that if you failed English 002 twice, then you would be expelled from the university and you would need to apply to a new one. And Tina's culture and her own personal belief was that failure was inexcusable, and in the beginning she actually says that if she fails this course then she would like to end it all. Thankfully, throughout the story you get to know Tina, and thankfully it doesn't end up that way. She does fail, but she doesn't commit suicide. On page 63, Mr. Goddard writes another quote that I found interesting. It says, "Take the clocks. I've heard that all of them are run from one master control, but if that's true, the master controller is a lunatic with multiple personalities. I've seen clocks running fast, clocks running slow, clocks flying triple time, clocks skipping and jerking around the dial, and clocks not moving at all. Why, I rarely or perhaps never see a clock with the correct time." This quote shows the diverse need found within the classroom. I also thought that this quote would be very relevant for differentiation within a classroom. Differentiation at my level, I teach 4th grade, so at the elementary level, is enforced due to the load of paperwork and special education, and also just some of the observations you get from a reading coach to make sure that you're on track. But professors and instructors at CSUM did not make accommodations for their students. The major conflict in this novel was that Mr. Goddard thought that two students, Tina Lee and Araceli, should receive passing grades even though they failed his final exam. He gives the two girls passing grades and disputes the English department's order for him to change them. Eventually, Mr. Goddard loses his position at the college, and Tina Lee is expelled for failing English 002 twice. Following her expulsion, she also loses her student work job at the computer lab. So, failing English 002 for Tina Lee had some heavy consequences. I had not considered that college students all have the same writing and English expectations no matter if they're native English speakers or English language learners. I had assumed that they met those requirements in their language somehow. Honestly, I hadn't given it much thought. I went to the University of Alabama. I'm from Tuscaloosa. I didn't have to overcome any English struggles, but I can relate a little bit in my own experience taking Spanish 103 at the University of Alabama. I prayed to pass much like Tina Lee does, but without all the pressures that she had. I hated the course. I did not feel like I belonged in the course. I didn't take another course, and I felt silly every day sitting in class. Also, because the class was taught in Comer Hall and some of the student organizations from other nationalities would meet there around my class time, I was often in the minority walking around the hallways, and that's a feeling I've rarely known. So in that aspect, I can relate to Tina Lee and understand that, she had all that other pressure, how stressful it must have been for her to need to pass this course, and how scary it must have been for them to dispute whether or not she had passed it. On in the story, she's taken English 002 in the fall from Mr. Goddard, and then they just have a teacher-student relationship. The next semester she takes English Comp 101, and she has a different professor. That professor thinks that she cheats, and he doesn't give her very much credit at all when Mr. Goddard had believed in her. She goes to Mr. Goddard for advice, and their relationship changes to a friendship that grows over the course of the semester. In the end, after Goddard disputes the changing of the grade and eventually the English department, he loses and is fired. Tina is eventually expelled. She attends Whittier Polytech. Goddard has a mental break due to some of his Vietnam issues, but during he was not conscious. He was sort of passed out in another state for several days, and Tina realizes her feelings for him, and she actually gets in touch with his parents, and they come and they sit with him. And this is a really good thing that she did for Goddard, because it reconnects him with his family. He'd not had much to do with his family in the past 15 years since he'd been home from Vietnam. Eventually, Goddard takes certification classes to teach high school English. The storyline changes throughout the story between Tina Lee and John Goddard. It goes from a teacher-student relationship to almost like a mentor relationship, then to a friendship, and eventually it turns romantic toward the end, which I was not expecting, but I was sort of hoping for after they got out of the teacher-student stage. Nothing becomes of it. They leave it as an awkward friendship with a romantic opportunity, but in the end, John Goddard's not ready for any type of romance, because he has to forgive himself first, then love himself, then he could love someone else, and he's just got so much to deal with. But I thought it was a wonderful novel. It really opened my eyes to maybe some of the struggles that second English language learners go through, and it wasn't completely centered around Asian learners, because you've got the minor character of Robert or Roberto, who is of Hispanic origin, and it talks about his culture a little bit, and how he even had changed his name from Roberto to Robert to try to blend in more, which I thought was very interesting, because I had not really thought about people making their name sound more American for college. I'll take what I've learned from this story and apply it to my own classroom, and hopefully I can be an encouraging, helpful teacher like Goddard, and raise the bar to challenge, but not raise the bar to discourage like some of the teachers did at CSUM.